Europe has declared war on Trump. A secret dinner in Brussels has become the headquarters for the EU's survival without the US. Europe is dividing the world without America. Macron threatens with force, Germany is cutting dependencies, and Italy is in turmoil. NATO is falling apart, Trump is isolated, America is coming apart at the seams, and Trump is losing Europe and even control over the US itself. Approval ratings are plummeting, Republicans are losing Texas and more. The Democrats are seizing power. An explosion in the US. The chain reaction of collapse has begun. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I am Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. A sensation. The EU is preparing for war with Trump. A secret dinner in Brussels. European elites are gathering behind closed doors and dividing the world without the US. Tensions are at their peak. The New York Times reports this, citing its sources. In the corridors of high geopolitics, this meeting is already being called a conspiracy against Washington. US relations are plunging into the abyss, trust has evaporated, the alliance is falling apart at the seams while chicken and roasted parsnips cooled on the table. Behind the scenes, fate was being decided. NATO and the future course of the EU without the US. European leaders held an emergency closed-door meeting to coordinate a unified strategy to counter the unpredictable policies of the American president. Europe is divided, but the goal is the same, to learn to live without the US. France. Macron is going all in to earn Trump's respect. In his view, it can only be earned by force. Threats in response to threats, pressure in response to pressure. The German leader insisted on the immediate reduction of business regulations, revitalization of the economy, and decreasing dependence on the American market. Italy, under Giorgia Meloni, who is considered ideologically close to Trump, urges not to burn bridges. Rome still hopes for dialogue before it becomes too late. So what is the essence of the plan? Europe is preparing to play a double game. In the near future, the goal is to pacify Trump by demonstrating strength. On the table are ideas for a NATO mission, Arctic Sentinel, drones, the fleet, and control over the Arctic. The message to Washington is simple. The EU is capable of protecting Greenland and the polar region from Russia and China on its own. This is a long-term or strategic game. The goal is to break the chains of dependency. Europe is accelerating its escape from American money and technology. New markets, a trade deal with India, its own capital market. The goal is a world without US dictatorship. But the plan is stalling. Eastern Europe is sounding the alarm. Poland and the Baltic states fear that the EU's game against Trump will distract attention from the main issue, the war in Ukraine. For them, American aid to Kyiv is a matter of survival, and they are not ready to sacrifice it for the economic ambitions of old Europe. The EU is breaking the chains, but risks losing its main ally. The secret dinner is over, but the consequences are just beginning. A political collapse in the United States. Trump is rapidly losing control over America. Disappointment with the White House is spreading not only among America's allies. Trump's own country is rebelling against him more and more loudly. The pressure on the president is snowballing. Congress is tightening the screws and voters are delivering their verdict at the polls. Texas has cracked. In the Republican stronghold, where people usually vote for the Reds, Democrat Taylor Ramett caused a political sensation and snatched victory in the special election for the state Senate. And in 2024, Trump won in this state by a margin of 17 points. The result of 26 is a cold shower for the White House. 57.2% for the Democrat versus 42.8% for the Republican. The victory in Texas is just part of a chain reaction. Democrats are winning districts one after another that haven't seen their victories in decades, from rural Pennsylvania to the coastal states. Since March of last year, there has been a series of electoral blows, and in the fall, Democrats dominated from Maine to California. New York exploded with voter turnout. In the metropolis, where politics is almost a religion, the mayor became the radical democratic socialist Zogran Mamdaniya. Turnout is the highest in 50 years. Trump's approval rating is at rock bottom, and Americans are overwhelmingly rejecting his foreign policy, trade wars, immigration decisions, and economic policies. Poll data confirms that the country is losing faith in its president. America is coming apart at the seams, and the blow is landing squarely on Trump. To be continued. The political cold shower for Trump is gaining momentum. The first year in the White House turned into an international failure for the eccentric occupant of the Oval Office. Loud promises of quick peace and an end to wars crumbled to dust. A house of cards. The planet still lives in a state of anxiety and turbulence. This was stated by public figure and head of the Ronald Reagan Republican Club, Boris Pincus.
Trump's initiatives are not finding support in the world, neither regarding Greenland nor the issue of Ukraine. Within the US, these topics are actively discussed by the media, shaping an increasingly critical public opinion. Currently, Trump's approval rating among Americans is about 36%. This is mainly his most loyal electorate.
The effect of a bombshell. Bill Gates is being treated for a shameful disease. A Slovak official is resigning. Prince Andrew is on his knees, and even Zhirinovsky has been dragged out of his grave. And all of this comes from the notorious pimp Harvey Epstein, who even once consulted Putin. And what about Trump? Believe me, there's still a lot of interesting and explosive stuff in those records. Let's watch.
Everything secret eventually comes to light. Lotergate is nervously smoking on the sidelines. The US Department of Justice has declassified more than 3 million pages related to the Epstein case. Personal correspondence, photos, and video files are damaging the reputations of the most famous, influential, and respected people around the world.
Epstein's sex empire was a KGB honey trap. The financier and pedophile repeatedly held talks with Putin after his conviction. And Russian girls were specifically brought in to collect compromising material on world-famous figures.
There is a mountain of compromat in the financier's files, more than you can imagine. The powerful of this world, top American politicians, billionaire technocrats, and members of royal families entrusted Epstein with their dirty secrets.
It's time to drop a truly big bomb. Trump is in Epstein's files. That's the real reason they haven't been made public. Have a nice day, Donald Trump.
For example, the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who not so long ago tried to blackmail Donald Trump with the Epstein files and categorically denied any involvement in the scandal, turned out to be one of the island's guests, asking questions about the sex parties.
From Jeffrey Epstein to Elon Musk, how many people will be in the helicopter flying to the island? Elon Musk's answer: probably just Tallulah and me. On which night will the wildest party on our island take place?
As revealed by the newly surfaced files, at first glance, a genius, billionaire, philanthropist, and just a humble guy. Bill Gates allegedly cheated on his wife regularly on the island. One of his many betrayals ended in disaster. The founder of Microsoft contracted a venereal disease from a Russian prostitute. In his correspondence with Epstein, Gates was inquiring about treatment for the disease.
Epstein claimed that Bill Gates contracted an STD from Russian girls. According to a recently published email, the Microsoft founder asked for antibiotics so he could secretly pass them on to his wife, Melinda.
In addition to influential billionaires, Epstein had dozens of gigabytes of compromising material on top politicians from the US and beyond. The disgraced British Prince Andrew, who was almost like a favorite photo model. Jeffrey, former Democratic President Bill Clinton, and current US Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. And of course, US President Donald Trump.
Fortunately, I have never been to Epstein's island, but it must be beautiful.
Based on the published files, the head of the White House is, to put it mildly, being disingenuous. Donald Trump not only visited Epstein's island, but also held similar sex parties, including with the financier, at his own Mar-a-Lago residence. In addition, the files contain various testimonies and accusations against the US president in the context of sexual crimes against children. Interestingly, at the beginning of January, the president of Colombia called the aggressive foreign policy of the US in Latin America an attempt by Trump to hide his involvement in the corruption of minors.
The pedophile clan wants to destroy our democracy. To prevent Epstein's list from being made public, they send warships to kill fishermen and also threaten our neighbors with invasion.
The names of top Russian politicians also appear in Epstein's files. At least 5 times in the correspondence, the now deceased Vladimir Zhirinovsky is mentioned. The Americans dubbed him the nationalist clown. Zhirik did not directly participate in the financier's sex parties, and the former LDPR leader had no need to. After all, Putin's court jester could always throw such parties himself without the help of the American sex trafficker. So guys, the name of the Russian dictator is mentioned in the files over 1,000 times. Moscow almost 10,000. In personal correspondence dating back to the mid-2000s, the American financier, through intermediaries including former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, offered Putin assistance in restructuring Russia's financial system. After Donald Trump was elected President of the United States in 2016, Jeffrey advised the Kremlin elite on matters of control and communication, with the head of the White House and from Epstein's correspondence with the then head of the Council of Europe, Thorbjørn Jagland. I'm a condom. It is known that at first the liaison was Russia's representative to the UN, Vitaly Churkin, and after his death in 2017, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
Churkin was excellent. After our conversations, he understood Trump. It's not difficult. I think you could suggest to Putin that Lavrov talk to me and get valuable information from our conversation.
At the moment, this theory is gaining more and more popularity in Western media and among the public. The theory, now backed by files, that Epstein was one of the most successful agents of the Russian intelligence services who, in addition to consulting in the interests of the Kremlin, collected a huge amount of compromising material on the most influential and well-known figures of the West.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
America has exploded. The people of the United States are against Trump. The murder in Minneapolis and impeachment. The consequences of these events are wearing Donald down as he is weaker than ever.
A new wave of protest has swept across the United States. There are hints of a new shutdown in Congress, and Trump's position is becoming even more unstable. All of this is because of the actions of the state's immigration police. They pushed the first domino, and the chain reaction was immediate. On January 24th, federal immigration agents shot and killed a man in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a U.S. citizen who stood up for a woman after she was shoved by law enforcement. And this is already the second death at the hands of ICE in Minneapolis in a month. The deceased's name was Alex Jeffrey Frecky. He worked as a nurse in the intensive care unit. Instead of apologies or remorse, the immigration police and the White House decided, on the contrary, to blame the murdered medic. Trump accused local police of inaction and said that Mayor Jacob Frey and Governor Tim Walz withdrew forces and did not allow the staff to be protected. ICE, which is why they had to defend themselves on their own. He also claimed that the murdered man allegedly had a gun and published a photo sent to him by ICE officers, adding that they were simply defending themselves. The leadership of the Federal Migration Service even stated that they are proud of their employees.
In point of actual fact, I firmly believe that the exceptionally rigorous and comprehensive training our law enforcement partners undergo, combined with the fact that they are so highly qualified, effectively prevented any specific gunfire from being directed at them. Consequently, our law enforcement service did a truly commendable and professional job by successfully apprehending and detaining the individual well before he was ever able to do it.
But the footage taken just moments before the tragedy confirms that the shooting was completely unnecessary. Freddie was holding a phone in his hands. From one angle, you can see an agent pushing a woman. When the camera returns to Freddie, he is hugging her by the shoulders. Then the agent pushes away a second woman. At the same time, the American reaches out his hand and stands between her and the agent. After that, Freddie was sprayed with gas, thrown to the ground, beaten, and then shot. The American, there probably really was a gun. However, it was registered and it was confiscated during the scuffle. It was only after one of the agents started to move away from Preeti with the gun in his hands that shots were fired.
Thank God we have video, because according to the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, these 7 heroic guys took the brunt of a battalion, or something like that. That's nonsense, people, that's nonsense and a lie.
After the tragedy, a new wave of protests swept through the streets of Minneapolis. Despite the freezing temperatures, people came out to try to drive Trump's agents out of their city. People chanted, "Go home," and "murderers." Federal agents used tear gas and flashbang grenades against the demonstrators. ICE's actions have also caused outrage in Congress because of the killing of an American in Minnesota. The likelihood of another shutdown is growing in the US. The Democrats have announced they are ready to block the budget package if it continues to include funding for the Department of Homeland Security, specifically about $10 billion for immigration and customs enforcement. Among the demands of Democratic senators are the introduction of stricter mechanisms for monitoring the actions of federal agents and increased accountability to prevent possible abuses. Donald Trump, for his part, does not seem to see any problem in the killing of a U.S. citizen. This position of the American president has even started to distance some of his fellow Republicans from him.
I believe that the deaths of Americans, what we are witnessing on television, raises deep concerns about the tactics of federal agencies and their accountability. And
all this is happening while Trump wants to occupy Greenland, and he is being told directly that this will lead to his impeachment. Thus, the chair under the American president is shaking like never before. Adding to this is the rather unhealthy appearance of the American president. In Davos, large bruises were once again noticed on Trump's hands. The White House claims that there's nothing serious health-wise. Donald Trump is in good health, they say. He just tends to bruise easily. After all, he takes aspirin daily to thin his blood, as his doctors have previously reported. And in Davos, Trump simply bumped into the corner of a table while signing the Charter of the Peace Council. The American president himself also insists that he is in excellent health and good spirits. But everything points to the fact that the domino effect has truly begun. And the risk that Trump will not make it to the end of his term is extremely high, especially considering that he has no intention of listening to criticism. The 47th American president has absolutely no desire to do so.
In Washington, the influence of the group of Ukraine supporters is growing. They believe the only way to force Putin to negotiate is to sharply strengthen Kyiv's position. One of the newly discussed ideas is Ukraine's proposal regarding Tomahawk cruise missiles, as well as how the United States continues to support Ukraine and further weaken Russia.
Tomahawks for the armed forces of Ukraine represent a new U.S. strategy to pressure the Kremlin. In Washington, they are discussing a plan to strike deep into Russia in order to force Putin to make peace.
I strongly suspect I cannot contribute any additional insights to this discussion.
A small group of Ukraine's supporters in Washington claims that the only way to force the Russian dictator to sit down at the negotiating table is to significantly strengthen Kyiv's position, and this can be done with the help of Tomahawk missiles.
As last year's experience showed, as soon as the United States even mentioned Tomahawk missiles, immediately Putin began to display the highest level of constructiveness, or rather, constructive behavior, and tried in every possible way to show that he wanted peace. But as soon as Putin realized that Ukraine wasn't going to get any Tomahawk missiles, that was it. After that, the campaign to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure and terrorize Ukrainian cities began.
At the center of this initiative is Dan Rice, president of the American University in Kyiv and former special advisor to the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, who met with the U.S. Secretary of Defense, according to Kyiv Post. Putin only responds to strength. If he doesn't agree to peace, then in my opinion, there is a high likelihood that President Trump will approve the use of Tomahawks. Rice refused to share details of the meeting, calling most of the conversation confidential. However, he did reveal what exactly he proposed. According to him, he directly asked the Secretary of Defense to provide Ukraine with Tomahawks, even if it was a small undisclosed number.
Even if we are given 20, 30 or 50 missiles, it won't make much of a difference. We need hundreds of missiles per month to have at least some kind of parity with the Russian Federation. And now the latest figures. The Russians launch about 300 different missiles per month at Ukraine. We need to launch at least as many, preferably more. Only then can we really put pressure on the Russian Federation.
Ukraine tried to obtain these missiles from the US even during Biden's term. But up to now, Tomahawks have still not been supplied to the Ukrainian army.
It is believed, we don't know for sure, but rumor has it, online sources say that the United States can produce about 100 missiles per year. 100 missiles per year. So, for the average person, it might seem, well, 100, that sounds like a lot. 100 missiles, that's a lot, right? Let's look at it from another angle. The cost of each missile, according to various estimates, it could be $2 million per missile or $4 million, as for example, when the Americans sold them to Japan at one time. So, for themselves, it's a little over 2 million, but for the Japanese, it's 4.25 million per missile. In other words, these are large sums. It would seem that if money isn't the issue, then the problem is the quantity.
Therefore, whether Trump will approve the supply of Tomahawks remains an open question. While some officials believe that American missiles could indeed become a lever of influence on Russia during negotiations, others fear that the transfer of Tomahawks, on the contrary, will undermine diplomatic efforts.
If the United States had clearly stated that in the event Russia destroys Ukraine's energy infrastructure, Ukraine would receive Tomahawk missiles, I guarantee that nothing like what is happening now would have occurred. But the United States has a different approach. They are trying to persuade Putin in a friendly way, to maintain good relations with him, and everything is along those lines. Therefore, to be honest, I don't really believe that the United States under Trump would give Ukraine a missile deterrent.
Let us recall that American Tomahawk cruise missiles are capable of storing up to 15 pre-programmed targets in their memory. They can also change their destination mid-flight and are capable of carrying both nuclear and conventional warheads.
And what do you think about the latest events? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more important updates and don't forget to like. Wishing you peaceful skies above.